What happened after Moses and Aaron came out of the tabernacle for the first time? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Leviticus chapter 9. We're going to be reading from verses 12 to 24. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus chapter 9, beginning of verse 12. And he killed the burnt offering, and Aaron's sons presented to him the blood, which he sprinkled all around on the altar. They presented the burnt offering to him with its pieces and head, and he burned them on the altar. And he washed the entrails and the legs, and burned them with the burnt offering on the altar. Then he brought the people's offering, and took the goat, which was the sin offering for the people, and killed it and offered it for sin, like the first one. And he brought the burnt offering and offered it according to the prescribed manner. Then he brought the grain offering, took a handful of it, and burned it on the altar besides the burnt sacrifice of the morning. He also killed the bull and the ram as sacrifices of peace offerings, which were for the people. And Aaron's sons presented to him the blood, which he sprinkled all around on the altar, and the fat from the bull and the ram, the fatty tail, what covers the entrails and the kidneys, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver. And they put the fat on the breasts. Then he burned the fat on the altar, but the breasts and the right thigh Aaron waved as a wave offering before the Lord, as Moses had commanded. Then Aaron lifted his hands toward the people, blessed them, and came down from the offering of the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of meeting, and came out and blessed the people. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people, and fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. In this chapter, we find for the first time Aaron and his sons officiating as the priests of God. Up until that time, Moses had been serving in that capacity. But from that point forward, as long as the law of Moses was in force, Aaron and his family would serve as priests. The first sacrifices that Aaron had to offer was a sin sacrifice and a burnt offering for himself. We noted in the last episode that the instructions for this sacrifice were slightly different concerning the blood, as was found in chapter 4, but said, since God had commanded it to be done this way, that Aaron simply obeyed. At the end of the episode, we had Aaron completing the sacrifice. Coming to verse 12, Aaron killed the burnt offering, and then the blood was sprinkled around the altar of burnt offering. Then the rest of the preparations for this offering were made, as laid out in chapter 1. The animal's parts were cut into their pieces and burned on the altar. The entrails and the legs were washed, and then they too were burned on the altar. Once this was all done, now it was time to offer the sacrifices for the people, namely the sin sacrifice, the burnt offering, the grain offering, and the peace offering. Taken together, these sacrifices represented the children of Israel's devotion to and submission to God as their only God, the one who promised to forgive their sins. Because one must come to God in a holy manner, the sin sacrifice, though it was mentioned fourth among the sacrifices, is offered first. As we said in the last episode, the children of Israel, rather than offer a bull as the sin sacrifice for the whole congregation, here offered a goat. This was not contrary to chapter 4 because God had told them to do so here. It was offered as a sin sacrifice and dealt with like the first sin sacrifice was. The burnt offering of a calf and a lamb was offered next according to the prescribed manner mentioned in chapter 1, and already done by Aaron earlier. Next came the grain sacrifice, which Aaron took a handful of and burned on the altar besides the burnt sacrifice of the morning, following the instructions found in chapter 2. And then finally the peace offering of a bull and a ram were made, following the instructions found in chapter 3 and then in chapters 6 and 7. Once Aaron was done, he lifted his hands towards the people, blessed them, and then came down from offering their sacrifices. This would tell us that there was some sort of incline that the priests would ascend in order to offer sacrifices on this altar. When studying Exodus 20, 22 to 26, we noted that God's instructions against steps going up to an altar were instructions concerning altars other than the altar of burnt offering in the tabernacle. The reason that God gave for this prohibition was so that the nakedness of the one offering would not be exposed. God gave all the priests linen trousers to wear under their robes for this purpose, so having an incline here would not be a problem. Moses and Aaron then went together into the tabernacle for the first time. What went on in there, we do not know, but I'm sure Moses explained to Aaron what his tasks were concerning the holy place and they likely would have communed with God there. Once they came out, they again blessed the people. Suddenly, though, the glory of the Lord appeared to them, as was promised earlier in the chapter. This manifestation of the glory of the Lord came in the form of fire, which consumed the burnt offering that was still burning on the altar along with the fat. Doing this showed the Lord's approval of what had occurred. When the people saw it, they shouted, probably with a mixture of joy and fear, for it says that they also fell on their faces, a sign of respect for God. With the priesthood now set up and the initial sacrifices offered and accepted by God, the regular daily duties of the priests could now begin. But as we'll see in chapter 10, God expects his priests to be holy and to take their jobs seriously, or severe consequences will follow. We hope you'll return for that discussion. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Leviticus chapter 10, verses 1 to 7, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.